Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We have a couple of folks still logging in, so we will take 2 more minutes before we get started. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I think we can start. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm Ziv. I'm the director of product at Zenity. Zenity is a company who is focused on securing citizen development through low-code, no-code apps and automations. And today, I'm putting on my OWASP hat, which I'd like to do many times in the past. And we're going to drill down and provide insights to the entire community here, both from the aspects of business or classic business user mistakes, or what could go wrong when people are building low-code, no-code apps. And also we have two of my colleagues, John and Yana, who are going to review the OWASP top 10 with a spin that is or trying to focus, of course, on the business user aspect. As we know that as security professionals, we are trying to help guide developers always make the right decisions when building their apps. When we take a look at low code and no code, this is even harder, as these end users who are building the apps, those are business users who are by definition non-tech savvy, and it's our job and responsibility to guide them through the journey of how to build an app in a secure manner. So we have to first help them be aware of the security concerns and stuff they have to be aware of, and of course help them with the best practices of how to do that. And the way to do that and to pull them into security awareness is, of course, to make sure that our terminology is clear to the business user, to the average business user. We have a lot to cover today. In case we won't be able to, don't worry. We have additional meetups coming up. Super psyched to be here and share our insights with the community. Feel free to share everything you have on Twitter, Slack, the community Slack channel. We'll post that, of course, in a few minutes as well. Everything that you see here is recorded, and you'll get the recording later, including the materials of the slides. Feel free to reach out to either myself, John, or Iana for questions mid-show, after, whatever works for you guys. We're here for you. And I think that without further ado, we can hand this over to John and Iana to start with their presentation. So John, can you give this to you guys?
Thank you very much, Ziv, and thank you everyone for your time today. For Iana and I, we're going to be going through a few things. First, we're going to briefly introduce ourselves. We're going to talk about one of the first challenges that we saw when we were looking at the low-code, no-code top 10 and some of the work that we've done to help hopefully fix some of those things that we saw as early challenges. And then we want to talk a little bit about our vision about where we think things can be going and some of the things we want to be doing with this next. As a quick introduction, I am John McTiernan. I'm the CEO and founder of DT Group. DT Group, we're a consultancy focused on companies getting the best out of their low-code, no-code tools, specifically business intelligence and RPA. And we have a focus really on helping companies grow and build their citizen development programs. And security is always a major part of that, which is what brought me to OWASP and the work that we're doing. Iana?
Thank you, John. Hey, everyone. I'm Yana. I'm an application and offensive security engineer and consultant at CBR in the Netherlands. Currently, I'm working in embedded applications and robotics, which is super awesome. But I spent many years as a software developer. So I would develop web apps and augmented reality for HoloLens. That was a lot of fun. But there was always like a commonality of security and threat hunting and my love of data. So now I get to combine all of that. And I guess my passion for accessibility will be shown through this presentation as well.
So before we get too deep into it, we wanted to make sure we started with a common vocabulary. I have to admit, I've been talking about citizen development for a few years, and I've yet to meet somebody who I say the term and they go, oh, I know what that is. So just in case for anybody here, when we're talking about low code, no code, we're really talking about two very different user groups. First, you've got your pro code developers where they already come from a development background. They understand, how software is built. They have at least some understanding of security. And low code, no code really acts for them as an accelerator. They can do the same job they were doing before, but they can do it faster. Citizen developers are people in the business. They are not people who are traditionally trained as developers. It could be the really bright problem solver from finance, HR, or anywhere in your organization. And as their job through as much of the career as they've had has not been software, they usually don't understand all the different components of a software development lifecycle and why parts of it matter. The security concepts, they may know the terms, but they really don't know what they mean or how to interact with them. And all the work that I do, I always start with the idea that a citizen developer, just like any other new developer, is just a junior developer. And our primary responsibility with any junior developer is to get them up to a level of intermediate capabilities as quickly as possible. That's not just security, but security obviously is the focus of today. And this is a whole new opportunity for them. This is taking them out of whatever job there has been and giving them a completely different path in their lives. So very exciting that low code, no code makes that a possibility.
So when you visit the OWASP website, like one of the things that you see here is that we're here to create resources. We're here for cybersecurity, but really, it's also about creating something that's accessible for everyone. So I wanted to take this critical lens to the low code, no code top 10. And it's not just low code, no code. This is across all of our OWASP documentation. So we're deeply knowledgeable, we're deeply technical security professionals, but we want to share this with more than just the deeply technical security people. So we definitely have the resources. So when John thought, oh, we need to make this a bit more accessible, we need to think about the wording, I thought it was a great opportunity to try to help by, providing some of my knowledge and my technical knowledge mixed with John's like business knowledge and how to speak to different users. So the people we work with, they're varied. They're not always engineers. And, this is just a few people, but I like to think of it from a UX perspective. So I used to be a UX researcher. Even as a software developer, I always worked with my users to get feedback from them. And I wanted to know what was working, what wasn't working, if the language I'm using didn't sit with them. They could be internal, users or, customer facing. So management, we have different layers of management. We could go all the way from our C level, like our CEOs, CFOs, but also the product owners, the business analysts, the business managers, project managers. They have something that they're, specifically trying to achieve. They want to manage risk, and usually that risk is, are we going to hit our deadlines? How do I communicate the needs? How do I get the resources that we need and like prevent our team from having any blockers? They really want to enable the team to do the work that they're doing. We might also have UX UI designers in the team, or someone that's working with the team. They really think about the user, develop that flow, that experience. This is something that we should tap into as well with accessibility, but they want to understand the user actions and the risk if a user doesn't take the intended path. They want to educate users by showing them, hey, this is the button, like you should click. And I'm hoping that they also want to enhance the security process, because every time I involve them in the conversation, they get it, they understand, they just don't know how to be involved. And then we have our development team. They are creating some value, they're creating a feature, they're adding to that with their deep expertise. It might be in a specific domain or business. They're prioritizing their work. They're trying to involve like secure development or thinking about their engineering practices. But the thing is, all of them need to talk together. There needs to be some kind of common language, some kind of common framework. When I have resources that just point to OWASP, it's not always enough. That might hit some of this audience, but not all of this audience. And so one of our, our main goals were really trying to improve collaboration and also the communication that we might have with clients, with teams, but also between the teams and those domains. I work with a lot of organizations and they're very disjointed. They have like deeply technical expertise in one corner and their business analysts in another corner. And they're not always like sharing information, but they're also not talking the same language. So we want to start sharing this security knowledge in that accessible way. And my personal favorite is secure design in the development process. So what does that mean? Who here is familiar with threat modeling? Like, who uses it as part of their work? Because we're going to do a live threat model. John, no, you weren't too fast. You can go to the next slide. How can we break into this safe? Can people put in the chat or like speak up, anything like that? Like, what are some ways that we can break into this safe? Would we need any tools to maybe pick that lock?
So my kids love the YouTubers where they're always taking the sledgehammer and just beating the safe until it yields.
Yeah, we've got like in the chat, crowbars, know the combination, totally. Like maybe you can social engineer your way into knowing the combination. I used to do red teaming like for offices that were opening, and I would always find like notes written around with like passwords on them. Try all the combinations, totally. Work for the safe company is a great one.
These are great answers.
But what we've done here is we've presented a problem in a really creative way. We have a goal that's easy to understand. And what we just did was we threat modeled. Yes, still the key, definitely. I'm not condoning any like criminal actions, but we're all like hackers and security folk here. So yeah.
I love break the law.
So, threat modeling. The threat modeling really is about a conversation. It's talking about like what can go wrong? What are those risks? We need to communicate those risks to different layers of the business as well. It's not just to the developers or the people that are designing or creating this software or whatever it is they might be making, but to the business itself, like why should they actually care about this? And I really believe that if we make our documentation more accessible, then it can also act as that. It can act as a communication and, I don't know, decision-making tool, which I think would be really amazing. So approachability changes. I didn't use a framework there. We did an attack tree, which is very sort of creative. There's not really much structure to it, but some people do threat modeling with a framework like Stride. We're creating a framework by having that top 10, but now we need that shared understanding and that shared vocabulary. So for example, we have our account impersonation. We have a gist, we explain what this is. I think that many security professionals would understand this, at least to some extent. We have words like privilege escalation and attackers and user identity. And we wanted to take another look at this and say, okay, how can we take this another level higher? How can we explain this in a way that maybe more people could understand? So people understand that there are critical components of a system, maybe, that we want to track what a user is doing. And we also want to tell them why they want to track it. So if someone is impersonating, it could look like actions were taken by one user, but they're actually being done by someone else. So we're not sort of getting into the how or, the application or the technicality of that, but, what is it and what is the effect of that? We also tried to think of high-level attack scenarios. So we have some great attack scenarios that are already there. And then I was thinking, okay, when I'm talking to management, how do I frame these scenarios for them so that they can be part of that decision of whether this is a risk or not? So we're talking about a developer building an application to help the sales team in the field. The developer uses their credentials and we spell it out. We say, with their username and their password. When writing the application, so all sales made through this app are attributed to the developer, not the salesperson facilitating the sale. Now, that could be a very real scenario that people face. And John, maybe you faced, spoken to clients that are like this as well.
Absolutely. And like you say, sometimes the hardest part is just what feels like tech word soup for people that aren't in security, like all these buzzwords. The learning curve feels so high because you have to understand all those pieces. All of our conversations have just been about approachability, and that word kept coming up. How can we take the average person off the street who reads this and goes, okay, I get that. That at least conceptually makes sense. May not know what to do with it yet, but at least I understand what it means.
Exactly. And so, goals for thinking about this and bringing it at a higher level is how can we use plain language? How can we make it a relatable scenario? But I am very passionate that I still want to teach people the security concept. And so is John. We don't want to treat people as if they can't or shouldn't understand this. In fact, what we're hoping for is that by giving them a higher level explanation, if they're interested in reading more about it, they still have all the technical descriptions below. They can still dig deeper about it. And, it would be great if they wanted to, but not everyone has to, and not everyone cares about that either. That's okay too. Another one that we're highlighting here is injection handling failures, and we did do this for every single one. So, here we talk about specific data, how it introduces risk to the application or the automation, the connection, the workflow, like many words that we might use within the domain, and you might need that domain knowledge. And I mean, our new description is pretty short. It might not hit everything, and that's where we need your help as well, but this is our first attempt at it. When users input data into a system, that data can be interpreted as code to run rather than data to be stored or data to be communicated. This is one of the most common things that I see whenever I'm doing code review or pen testing or anything like that. This is a core concept that people sometimes struggle to understand, what it actually means. And so here, again, just trying to be in plain language, what this actually means. And a high-level scenario here is a user builds a registration form for new users. A malicious user uses their knowledge of database commands to delete all users from the database. So here it was important that we didn't really talk about SQL or any sort of database specifically, or any language or any query language specifically. We just wanted to let them know that there are commands, you can do things, and that will affect the database. Users with pending orders try to check on the status of their orders to be told their account doesn't exist. So we're giving a real scenario of if you were using this application and suddenly you're met with account doesn't exist, you can relate to that. You can understand that because many people have, even if you haven't used a specific website like this, you may have already got an account on some website. And so you can kind of understand what that means. But to be met with an account doesn't exist, we're now introducing that injection handling failures. They're complex and they can lead to very unexpected results. Wonderful.
So I think this is the first point where we actually have an ask of the group. Yana and I have loved working with her. She's just absolutely brilliant, and she has helped me as a non-security expert understand things at a much deeper level than I ever would have. But we are two voices, and just in the picking the safe example, like Iana and I did this a couple of days ago when we were preparing for this, and we came up with only probably a third of the ones that quickly popped up in the chat. More voices, more perspectives, more people looking at the same problem creates a dramatically better approach, and that's another one of the very common themes that we're trying to bring. So, how did we do? Are these now approachable? Can the average person understand them? How can they be better? If anybody has thoughts about how we can make them better, please let us know. That's the first thing that we're really asking this audience for, and the first purpose in our spending the time together with this group. But Iana just went through a couple of the examples of some of the changes we made. I want to go back to what were some of the guiding principles when we started this work. And first, we were very cognizant that we're trying to balance the language between the two different personalities, but without watering it down. Each one has very different needs, and exact language is much more powerful for the deep security expert because that will create a deep level of meaning, but then it has to be approachable. So we had the belief that a high-level gist that doesn't go very deep is enough for most citizen developers, and for really anybody who's not one of those deep security experts. It gets the wheels spinning and going, okay, I think I understand what this means. But then I'm especially an example learner. Like, I can read the gist and go, okay. But then when I read an example, that really starts clicking home. So we wanted to make sure both of these were completely plain language, readable by anybody who might find these pages and find this information. But we definitely wanted to retain the original description and the more exact examples, because again, that exact specific language speaks more deeply to security experts and just goes to a very different level. So we hope we did this. We want to hear from the group how well we've done and how we can make it better. But as we were doing this, we also immediately started asking the question, what's next after approachability? Now people understand the problem. What do they want to do with it? And we think the answer is kind of obvious. Knowing that there's a risk is great, but you want to fix it. So you have to be able to take that approachability and now do an action against it. And in general, there's a few different buckets of areas that we consider there to be actions you can take. I'm going to go through these quickly for time. First, you want to train people, whether it's the citizen developers, the managers, or anybody else in your organization. First line of defense is more people knowing about it. Second, there's monitoring tools. Zenity, Michael, and Ziv, who are our hosts today, they have created tools specifically for the low-code, no-code space. But there are other tools that most organizations have that do at least some of the same things. Do the groups that manage those tools know what you're doing with low code, no code? As new solutions, whatever tool you're using come online, how do they know that those tools are now part of the set that has to be monitored? If there's not a constant communication about what your team is doing, the benefit of some of those tools falls down. The Center of Excellence is really often the hub for some of those communication channels. And this is a term that sometimes I think can feel very heavy. I want to make it clear, I consider a Center of Excellence a concept first. It can be one part-time person. It could be a group of 20 people or more, depending upon your need. But it's best practices. It's certain checklists. It's audits. It's bringing all of the different techniques to help manage these risks together under one umbrella and making sure they're getting done. Whether it's that one person working with others in the organization who already have that responsibility, or it's centralized as secondary, somebody has to be doing it. And security is never one and done. So you also have to then continue to monitor and mentor your people, continue to look at how your organization and the threats are changing. So anything you do has to be a continued effort. So we want to get to the point where we've said, great, people now understand it. How can we give them tactical things to do within these buckets so that they can start remediating and managing the risks? So again, start with approachability and then go to making them actionable. And we realized pretty quickly we can't do that. And it's not that we don't have the technical knowledge, although in some of these domains we don't. It's really because low code, no code is an umbrella. And as an umbrella, it's not specific. It's just too general. Within this umbrella, you've got business intelligence, RPA, application development, platform as a service, integration platform as a service, and others. And certainly more will be coming online in coming years. You can't talk about specific actions unless you get specific with the tools, because these do present very differently in each of these tool sets. So our next steps have really been driven by our original goal and this realization that we're kind of working at the wrong level to begin. We need to get down lower. The first step we need to do is we need to get into each domain. All the work that we've done with specific examples and gists and descriptions, we want to have the exact same thing for each of these domains. And then once we have that specificity, we want to talk about the actionability. How can we take training, tools, center of excellence, and ongoing mentorship, and give people tactical things they can do to help minimize these risks? And this again goes back to our ask of the group. I have enough knowledge in business intelligence and RPA, and Yana is brilliant. Together, we can do this. But if we're doing it alone, we're not going to get as good of an answer. And when it comes to these other domains, we just don't have the expertise right now to do it well. So we need your help. And this help can be big and small. It can be as small as, hey, we encountered the security problem. Great. Helps Yana and I thinking about some examples that we can be putting into these. That's fantastic. Or it can be much larger, where you might ask to take one of these domains and drive it. Use the community and drive out the complete answer. Be part of a committee with Yana and I and others, whoever comes forward and asks to be part of this, to drive them out. Again, lots of different ways. Please start just by letting us know that you want to, and we will find ways to work together and make this happen. I think the end goal that we have has a tremendous value to the community. It cannot happen without more participation.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you, Yana, and thank you, Ziv, for the opportunity to share this.
Most definitely. Thank you, folks. This was wonderful. Again, everybody on the call, I encourage you to ask questions either through the Zoom chat or through Slack. We'll be reviewing them, mid-call and also after. And for the ones we won't be able to reply on the call itself, we'll just reply back through Slack. I think we can continue with the rest of the slides. Just give me a second. Okay. The second part of our presentation is about common mistakes when business users are building low-code, no-code applications, or what can go wrong in citizen development. Throughout the slides, I have our Slack and Twitter and GitHub and email group associated with the slides, so feel free to just take them and join the community. Through the agenda, we're going to cover a few use cases. I'm not sure if we'll have time to complete all of them, but if not, of course, we will have another session drilling down into more of these. We have tons of insights to share. So in this specific portion of the slides, we're going to cover excessive access, data leak, and implicit sharing within low-code, no-code platforms. And we have to remember that in the shared responsibility model for low-code, no-code, the majority of decision-making isn't in the hands of the security professional or the platform admin. Many of the critical, decisive moments when something can go wrong is in the hands of the business user. And we can't really expect them to know this by heart. We have to make sure that we provide them with the guidance and the tools to make sure that they are making the best decision for them and for the organization, of course. So We'll start with excessive access. Excessive access in a high level means, of course, that a single identity or a user has access to too many things he shouldn't have access to, or too many identities have access to the same object or data source. When we talk about data leak and sensitive information being exposed, we are talking about the fact that many of these low-code, no-code platforms have notions where sensitive information like credit cards, social security numbers can get involved, and how do you handle storing them in a correct manner. And implicit sharing means that unintentionally you can share your credentials without even realizing that you've shared your credentials, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. So let's take some example and use cases of actual apps. Some of them are actually in the wild. You can see them on GitHub. So let's start with excessive access. This app is called the Timesheet Management app. You can grab it from GitHub, tweak it to your needs, but it's basically open source. The time reporting app basically allows or facilitates time management for companies who are billing customers by the hour. Think about law firms, accounting, or any other professional services or consulting firms. And the idea here is for the end user, your every employee to log into this, getting his identity, from his identity provider, in this case, Azure AD. And once he's logged in, he's able to basically submit a form, a weekly form or a monthly form that highlights all the billables for his work for that month, so we can basically bill the right account, the right customers. Now this is an intermediate app, but it's very robust. So let's drill down and see how it works. So basically here, the only thing we have to do is basically submit a new form. The customer or the end user, more correctly, he needs to select the week. He needs to select the billables, meaning the customers who we want to charge, and provide basically the amount of hours he worked daily for that customer. And of course, he can also provide like a notes or project quotes or whatever he needs. Now he can save this as a draft. He can submit it for approval. He can edit it later. He can do many things, but basically see how much data is in this form. Now, this is just an example of something that is actually out there in GitHub and organizations are actually using it, but this can have tons of other information, sensitive information. But for this example, we'll go with this. So in this case, the timesheet was saved and submitted, and the manager in this case can see all the pending requests. So the app not only sees, what the actual user is doing, the app can also forward all that information to the manager. And now the manager is able to see all the pending requests. You can see the user specifically who is about, or the user who was actually the submitter of that billable, which customer he was trying to bill, of course, and of course the hours, and if we have any notes. And of course he can reject it, and we can start from scratch or approve it. Now, think about what's happening here behind the scenes, though. This app is really elaborate. The app needs to take all this information that the user has inputted into the app. It needs to store it somewhere, right? It means that the end user who is using this app needs to have access to that destination data source, the data storage, in order for the app to act on his behalf and actually save the data. And we'll see how that works in a second. The app also has to recognize who is the manager of this user in order to conduct and streamline this approval process. Now, the minute this timesheet, of course, is approved, this app can actually go ahead and trigger other automation flows, internal automation flows, but we won't get into those in this system. Now, one of the small things I wanted to show is that indeed low-code and no-code, when we think about low-code and no-code apps, we always think about drag and drops. And today, in today's world, we're talking about generative AI, but in many platforms, you have robust areas where you can actually code. So the area, you know, or the place to make a mistake is even larger. Okay, so the app is almost ready. The user or the admin who built this, the only thing he needs to do is to save the app and actually publish it, making it accessible to sharing, which we will do in a second. And in this moment, we want the admin who built this app, or the HR team, more precisely, who built this app, needs to make sure that the target audience have access to the data source who is serving this app. So before we share it with everybody, we want to make sure that it's operational and it's usable. So in this case, the maker chose to use SharePoint as a data source layer for this app. Now, SharePoint is just an example. It's very simplistic. It's very easy to use. It's straightforward, and it works. It could have been Excel Online, could have been a SQL Server database, could have been Dataverse itself, whatever works. Low-code, no-code platforms, they allow you to manage the data layer in a variety of manners. In this case, SharePoint was very, very simple to maintain and to build. Now, this SharePoint list is called time entries. And basically here, we are storing, or the app is storing, all the forms that were submitted with their status, either it's pending or approved, who submitted them, who's the manager of that user, all the billables, meaning all the accounts, all the customer names, and of course, the hours that they were billed. Now, the app on the front end side is doing something very clever, of course. It's filtering all the data that is not related to the user who logged in. So, for example, Ziv is only able to see the billables that Ziv is working on. But it's not the case for the backend. So as you can see, this SharePoint list doesn't have any row-level security embedded within it. So if by any chance the user or any user that has access to the app is compromised and can get access to this list, he'll be able to view everything. And we will discuss other things that he can do with it in a few seconds. So I want to make sure that my end users are able to basically insert new records right into this list by using the app. So one thing I have to do is I have to share this list with them. I have to provide them with access. So a very simple way of doing this is to share it with everybody. And we'll see that in a second. Now, the default setting is an edit permission, which is privileged access. And the reason why we need edit permission is because they need to add things into this list, update them as time goes by, and delete them if necessary. And all through the app, of course. But the end user still needs to have that ability within his credentials. So the easiest way to go about it, of course, is share it with everybody in the company. And in this case, it's really important because I don't want to cherry pick. I really want everybody in the company to use this timesheet reporting. Imagine an HR team that wants to facilitate time reporting in a centralized location. So they'll do this through the app. Okay, so now this list is basically shared with everybody in the company, but nobody really knows about it, right? Nobody knows that this time entries list is available for use until they have access to the app. Now, the app is almost operational. The only missing portion is to share the actual low-code, no-code app with the users who we want to actually use the app on a daily basis, or a weekly basis in this case. So the only thing we need to do is click on share and share it with everyone. Low-code, no-code platforms make it really, really simple to share apps either with specific users, with groups, and in many cases, everybody in the company. Now, it could be, I can see this working from productivity perspective, why you want to share an app with everyone, but we see this day in and day out as a very simple manner to just share an app in a simple way. And there is very little use cases where you want to share an app with everyone. So you have to be really cautious with going about it. Not to mention that it's almost undetectable. It's very hard to spot. Now, we've shared this app with everybody, and let's see what happens. So you see here that once I share it with everybody, basically, I'm providing them, of course, with access to the data sources that the app is using, in this case, the time entries table. Also, Office 365, just because I need to understand and know automatically who is the manager of the user who is currently logged in. And I can even send an email invitation to new users. Now, let's say I'm a guest user in the tenant. Because the app was shared with everyone, I was included in that org-wide access level, and I'm able to use the app. Now, if I were to just go into the network feed of my browser, with a few simple clicks, I would have found the data source the app is using. So in this case, we can easily see it's zenitystage.sharepoint.com. It's a site called Zenity Stage, and the specific table is called time entries, which means that now I have the ability to actually browse to that specific path. And because the end user who built, the maker who built this app wanted to provide access to everyone, I now have access both to the app and to the actual time entries SharePoint table. Now remember, I was provided with privileged access, edit permission, because I needed to use them through the app. Now think about a malicious actor compromising any employee in your company, or a vendor or a contractor who now has access to this app and can see this SharePoint list. He can easily find it through the app. He can go and view all the information about your customers within this SharePoint list. And because there is no row level security binding to this SharePoint list, he can just view everything. Not to mention, he can do harm. He can, for example, purge everything from this location. So imagine that now the finance team who is looking at this and trying to understand, what's transactions and billables we should have for customers this week, and they see nothing because everything was deleted, all history, all new requests. Just imagine the damage a company who is sole purpose or the billable funnel is solely placed on this, and just imagine the damage. I'll pause really quickly to check if we have questions. If not, we'll go and continue this. I don't see anything.
So Ziv, I'm checking the chat and I don't see any popping up at this point.
Great. Feel free to reach out through Slack or through Zoom chat. We're happy to help with the examples. All of the examples, of course, will be available later. If you need any specific assistance or follow-ups, if you want to drill down into those examples or talk about other ones. Okay, so we talked about the fact that the app is providing this front-end filter for the end user, which is very simple. The app maker, the only thing he needs to do is just to place a small filter and say that only the user who is logged in is supposed to view his own records. And it's great from the app side, but what about the data source? So we've, in a very simple way, showed how an attacker can just exploit the app, view its data source, and because of the way the app was built, in a very quick way, let's say, but in a very unsecure way, the attacker can now view all the data. He can export all the data, save it to himself. He can easily take all of this, export it, dump it on his local machine, purge everything, and then, of course, ask for money for ransom. Let's continue with data leak and sensitive data. So we see day in and day out that because business users are the ones who are building these applications, whether it be customer success teams, support, finance, HR, legal, compliance, etc., the core data they touch is business data, day in and day out, and it's highly sensitive. You'll surprised to see some of the apps and the data that they handle on a daily basis. So let's take this scenario. This is an employee onboarding app. It's very simple. The main interest for this app is to onboard new employees as fast as possible ahead of time. So Imagine that you are a manager, and you just recruited a new employee, and before he gets to his first day of work, you want to make sure that he has everything lined up, all of the access in place, all the equipment in place, banking information in place, everything that he needs to have quickly and efficiently as possible, so he can get a good start when he comes in for his first day, and orientation and everything. So the only thing he needs to do is to basically go into an app that the HR team has built and provide some critical information about the user. It could be his name, his social security number, his address, his date of birth, etc., etc., etc. Once all of that is fed into the app, the only thing the manager has to do is save. Now, in this app specifically, they chose to use Dataverse as the data storage layer of this app. Could be anything else, but in this case, it was Dataverse. It's just very simple. Again, I think simplicity is something that we see day in, day out, and business users will do most of the times what comes easy to them, which makes sense. Now, in this case, we're talking about Power Apps. And in Power Apps, there is a notion of a default environment, which means that it's a personal productivity environment. Or no, let's take it from the top. Let's talk about environments real quick. An environment is a logical container of applications and automations and data connection. And there are different types of environments. An environment for production layer or production level apps. You have testing environments, you have development environments, and you have personal productivity like sandbox environments. The default environment is exactly that. It's a personal productivity environment where everybody in the organization, including guest users, can go inside, play around, build their own things to make their life easier in their day-to-day operation. Now, it's the simplest place to build things. So in our job, we see that the majority of apps and automations are being built in this environment. Now, one thing that people are forgetting is that this environment is shared and the data is shared. Meaning if I build something here, other personnel like contractors or guest users in the tenant can also see that data. So in this case, the app is basically taking personal information from new hires, basically, and storing it in a Dataverse table. So this is a custom table that was built solely for the purpose of using the app, and I'm highlighting the fact that it's custom just because it's very easy to spot. We'll talk about it in a second. Now, imagine an attacker getting access to either a guest user account, an employee account. It doesn't really matter. As long as he has access to any user, he now has access to the default environment. And by definition, has access to the tables, the data tables in the default environment, and can view all data, custom tables and native tables. So he can easily browse through the custom tables and understand what type of data they hold. He can do that simply by browsing. He can do that through looking at the schema of the tables. He can basically dump the schema out and run a small script to find sensitive information. He can do many things. Now, when he finds a table with sensitive information, he can actually jump into the table, not looking at the schema, but actually looking at the actual data. So in this case, he found the table that was holding the new hires information. And so now he has access to social security numbers, bank accounts, employee addresses, contact information, emails, phone numbers, etc., etc. Now, this was, of course, would have been avoided if the app and the Dataverse table was built on a different environment with security roles in place. But those are, of course, things that are not native or come easy to business users. And I'm not sure that in many of the cases when you build a low-code, no-code app, there is a gate that really stops you and stopping you before you are doing such a mistake, like in a classic FBOC fashion. So this was built from the ground up in a matter of days and was just shipped to production. or in this case, the default environment. And now we mentioned that he can easily export the data and nobody would know that this happened. And one other thing that we can show is this: when this app is operational and a user can actually use it, it can invoke other sub-processes. So an app can easily trigger automation workflows. And in this case, those automation workflows can leak the data of the app. So in this case, what the maker tried to do is to basically take some of the important data from the form and route it to different teams in the organization. Now, this is done in a very simple way through Power Automate. The only thing you need to do is basically tie in a Power Automate flow that triggers every time a new form is submitted. And when you take that data and you then distribute it to the other teams, you're doing it through, for example, an email action. And dynamically, you take the content and you spread it out. But who has access to this flow? Because when this flow runs, all the logs will actually show all that sensitive information embedded within the flow. So let's take this flow, for example. You see this flow is going to the HR group. But who said that the HR group only holds HR employees? In this example, we are seeing that the flow is actually showing us or leaking the sensitive information within the logs, for example, the social security number. And we can see that the HR group is here under the role-based access control of the flow. But let's jump into that in Azure AD and see who is really inside this group. So you can see that we do have HR personnel in here, but we also have guest users. And because those guest users are a part of this group, and without even the knowing, I've now shared a flow that contains or leaks PII information of employees to a guest user who should definitely not see this information. I don't think we have the time to continue, but we'll definitely do another round because we have tons of other insights to share about how building apps and automations can go really wrong. And we are all for building low-code and no-code apps in a secure fashion. But I'll put a pin here to stop, as we want to talk about a bit our plans for 2024. So I want to thank you folks for joining, and I want to pass this along to Michael to talk about our 2024 plans.
Thank you, Ziv. Let me bring up a slide. Okay, I'm going to do it without the slide because I want to be mindful of everyone's time. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. This has been really like the amount of the responses we've been getting, the size of the community, contribution by amazing folks like the ones that you saw today. This is really amazing. Like, this is becoming a community in and of itself, which we are really excited about. I wanted to share with you what you can do to be better, to contribute even further to this effort and to be a bigger part of the OWASP low-code no-code top 10. The first thing on our list is that we are, since we've grown as a project and as a community, it's time to mature, and we are working through creating a visible, auditable, comprehensive process that everyone can take part in towards the 2024 version of the OWASP Top 10. The idea is to have public calls for contributions along the way, including reviews and calls for data. And that would allow us to, we're hoping that would allow us to bring in more voices from the community earlier in the process. We have gotten amazing feedback from folks suggesting new categories to be added and categories to be merged or somewhat change in definition. We are looking into examples to provide attack examples for specific platforms, for the major platforms that are out there. That would really help people make significant progress in their line of work. So that's one thing that would be the major thing across throughout 2024. We are starting right now with the call for data. That means that we're looking for any data that you can provide on security for low-code, no-code apps. What does it mean? If you have statistics about applications and the level of security that they have, that would be helpful. If you have concrete examples, if even just stories, like what happened in your organization, here's an app, I reviewed that app, and here's something that went wrong. You don't have to correlate it to the OWASP top 10. We could help you do that. But these concrete examples really help make sure that we are pinpointing things the right way. The other aspect of call for data is that we're looking for attack stories. So things that what happens when an adversary is taking advantage of low-code, no-code and is trying to get into business data or to do some sort of malicious bidding through those apps. Of course, this can all be anonymous. It doesn't mean you need to reveal information about your organization, but that would really help the entire community understand where we need to focus. And I'll finish off by saying that we are open for suggestions. If you have ideas on how these meetings could continue to work on a schedule, and like what are the topics that you'd like to see here. If you have contribution, you just seen John and Yana and Ziv. These folks are donating their time to get this project up and running. Thank you very much for doing this. That's why this community is actually exists. So thank you very much for that. And if you're interested in contributing, please reach out to any of us. We'd be happy to bring you into that process. And Ziv, thank you very much for bringing this all together.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys for joining. And thanks to our speakers today, Deanna, John, and Michael.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.